Hello and welcome to the grand finale of this Cruel Prince recap series. It's time to deep dive into The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. As always, I have to start out with a massive thank you to all of the artists for allowing me to use their work. These videos would not be what they are without all of this beautiful art, so please check out their pages. They will be linked in the description below. And thanks again to you all. Ending this series of videos is so bittersweet, but I'm so grateful for everything that it's brought me. I just hit 10,000 subscribers, mostly because of these videos, thanks to you all. So I just am filled with love and gratitude. Thank you for reading and listening and discussing and loving this story right along with me. Aw, I love you guys. Wait. The biggest thank you has to go to Holly Black, the author of this series that has changed my life and intertwined with my soul, as I'm sure it has for many of you as well. So go buy her books, tell your friends about the story, and keep an eye out for the new Carden POV book that's been announced. Yeah, big things coming from Miss Holly Black. And side note, I did see that forever ago, Holly Black posted on Instagram and called Matic Daddy Matic. She knows all, she has created all, and we should bow down to her. Wow. And really quickly, I am also starting a book club over on Fable, so you can join me there to read our first book, which is going to be The Stolen Heir by Holly Black. So if you are just as devastated about this ending as I am, you can join me over there so we can just continue the journey with the Oak duology. It's going to be great. I'm excited. But now it's time to catch up with our old friends here, because when we left things off, they were in a little bit of a tizzy. This time on the wall, we don't have a timeline exactly, because as the conclusion of the story draws near, we're going to be keeping track of the events and moments and decisions that lead us down a winding path until all of the loose ends are finally tied up at the inevitable end of this story. Because the stars have told us that there's only one direction this story can go. And I'm not talking about the boy band, baby. It's basically a timeline with a little bit of drama. As you can see, some of the loose ends are already established up here, such as the question of Vivi and Heather's relationship status, as well as Jude and Nikasia's hateful relationship, and Jude's ups and downs in her partnership with Lord Royben. These loose ends just need to be tied, but some of the other loose ends are still fraying, and so they're not ready to go up on the wall quite yet. Everything else is pretty much the same, with the addition of some new characters, but we will talk about them as they come up in the story. Alright, let's get into a little bit of a Wicked King recap here, because we left off with an all-new, confident version of Carden as the High King of Elfame, completely free from Jude's control, and married to his number one obsession, Jude herself. He used this newfound confidence to stop war from breaking out between the land and the sea by standing up to Queen Orla here and tentatively cementing an alliance between these two major powers. But they didn't come out unscathed. The ghost betrayed the Court of Shadows to help the Undersea, and Nikasia was also tied up to a tree for a minute, but she's fine now. Unrelated, but equally important, we found out that the Bomb and the Roach both have secret crushes on each other, and our favorite disappointing father figure, Daddy Matic, has quit his job as the Grand General and run away with half of the King's army thanks to Taryn, who has recently been wed to Foxy Locke and seems to be vying for Jude's spot as the favorite daughter. Speaking of Jude, she endured torture at the hand of Carden's ex, Nikasia, her mother, Queen Orla, and Carden's older brother, Prince Baelkin, for a few bleak weeks in the Undersea, but don't worry because she avenged her pain by murdering Prince Baelkin and then marrying Carden, effectively making her the new High Queen of Elfame. Although that kind of resulted in its own pain when, as punishment for Baelkin's murder, Carden exiled Jude to the mortal world, and she can only be pardoned by the crown, but no one knows that she's a royal now. So now Jude, the exiled queen, aka the Queen of Nothing, is trapped in the mortal world with her fae sister, Vivi, who has recently been through a breakup with her human girlfriend, Heather, after kind of like dumping the reality of the fae on her and expecting her to take it well. And also baby Oak is there, safe from the machinations of the fae court. For now. And that's what we missed, but It's not where we begin. And the Elfin King has sworn to wed a daughter of earth, whose child shall be by cross and water hollowed from the fairy's doom forever free. What if there be a fated day? Is it far away? Is it far away? Edmund Clarence Stedman, Elfin Song. This last installment of Jude's story begins with a prophecy. We take a little bit of a trip back in time to the birth of High King Cardan. Elfame has this tradition of reading the stars when a royal baby is born. So when little Cardan is presented to his father, High King Eldred, the royal astrologer Baffin tells him that Prince Cardan will be your last born child. He will be the destruction of the crown and the ruination of the throne. Only out of his spilled blood can a great ruler rise. Dad doesn't love that. Eldred decides then and there that his strategy to deal with this prophecy is to basically shut Cardan and his mother, Lady Asha, out and pretend they don't exist. The royal astrologer can already see this approach being a problem and thinks about what I think a lot of us think about when it comes to a prophecy. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And if you try and stop it, then that's going to be what makes it happen. And then we dive into Cardan's childhood. This is the first time we're really getting a canon explanation for the way that Cardan grew up. There have been snippets like the memory globe that Jude found in the royal chambers, but this is the first time it's really being laid out for us. Lady Asha didn't want to raise a baby, so she did the next best thing. She passed baby Cardan off to a cat that had just had a litter of kittens that didn't make it. So, Cardan was raised on cat milk. And that's why he's so catty. Am I right, ladies? Why is everybody leaving? What the hell? How did his feline childhood go? Not great. As soon as Cardan was big enough to walk, the cat was like, holy shit, you are not a cat. And then also abandoned him. So, he's not like other royal heirs. And to make matters worse, when Lady Asha was around, she would encourage Cardan's wickedness and cruelty because she thought it was funny, but also she felt like he was entitled to behave that way as a royal prince. We're also told a story from Cardan's childhood that kind of solidified his path to wickedness. One day, Cardan's older brother, Golden Boy Prince Dane, told Cardan that their dad, High King Eldred, would be so impressed if Cardan could shoot a walnut off of a mortal's head with a bow and arrow. Cardan wants nothing more than his father's love, so he says, yeah, easy, pass me the bow. But Dane stops him and says, I'm not done there, okay? Let me help you out. Give me your arrows and I'll give you mine. So that way, if you miss and your arrow ends up in this mortal's face, then I'll be the one that's blamed for it because it will be my arrow. So Cardan pointed his brother's arrow over this mortal's head, and then he realized that this mortal had not volunteered to play the prince's game. He was enchanted, forced by fairy magic to be at the whims of the prince. And he couldn't do it. He couldn't shoot. But it doesn't matter. Dane shoots the mortal in the throat with Cardan's arrow, so now Cardan is going to be punished for his death. High King Eldred locks Cardan's mother, Lady Asha, away in the Tower of Forgetting, forces Cardan to live with Prince Baelkin, and he is stuck with his reputation as a reckless and cruel prince with no choice but to embrace it. And you already know the rest. Back in the present day, High Queen Jude is living a very average mortal life in Maine, and she's in a bit of an interesting predicament because even though she's powerless and completely separated from the court, she's still living with a Greenbrier heir. And Vivi. Jude knows that Oak will always be in danger because of his bloodline, and she wants to do everything that she can to help him prepare for that kind of life, but she also doesn't want him to have the same kind of childhood that she did, you know? She's just a girl, okay? She should be at the club, not raising a fairy prince. Oak finishes playing this game of like pretend war outside with the local kids, so Jude sneaks up on him, grabs him by the throat, and chokes him until he almost passes out. And she starts to remind herself a little bit too much of her adoptive father, the Grand General, who we know as, say it with me now, Daddy Matic. Oak's reaction, which in my opinion is kind of justified, is to scream at Jude saying that he doesn't even want to be king. He doesn't want that kind of power. And it kills Jude inside a little bit because she does want that kind of power and she almost had it. And also maybe Matic did a better job at parenting her than she's doing with Oak, which is a bad thing because Oak is going to be the king someday. So we're starting off on a little bit of a low point here, but you know, what can you expect after a wedding that ends in exile? We've got a long way to go. Back at their apartment, Vivi is smiling at her phone, which means Heather update. Vivi has been texting Heather nonstop for weeks, and Heather has been radio silent until today. She sent Vivi a text that says, I want to forget Fairy. I want to forget that you and Oak aren't human. I don't want to feel like this anymore. If I asked you to make me forget, would you? Vivi's interpretation of this text is, oh my god, Heather still loves me and she wants to go back to the way things were before I lied to her about being a human. But Jude sees this text more for what it really is, which is a test for Vivi and also like a cry for help. This is a chance for Vivi to show Heather that she can support her and protect her, and that enchanting away her memories isn't the best option here. But Jude doesn't really know how to say that to Vivi, and she's torn because she wants to be loyal to Vivi as her sister, but also to Heather as a mortal dealing with the Fae. It always amazes me how non-confrontational Jude is as the like resident feral murderer of the group. I don't know how she does that. During her exile, Jude got herself a job. She has been spending her time as an independent contractor for the underground Fae community that exists amongst the mortals, i.e. getting into trouble for money. She's mostly been doing odd jobs for this guy named Brian, who is such a character. He seems to think he's like living in a noir film. He wears a lot of tweed and feather caps, and he asks Jude to sneak and steal and all the usual for some money. So she hops on her bicycle to go to work, and she reminisces about when she thought her future was going to be riding a noble steed as a knight for the High King, and it kind of puts her life now into perspective as she rides a bicycle to meet a man in a feather cap. Said man has a new job for Jude because one of the folk in the area, with a capital F, has been eating the other Fae of the community. So Brian wants Jude to go to this fairy and make her promise that she will stop eating the other folk. And for the Fae, a pinky promise like that is magically binding. Now there was a time, not too long ago, when I yelled at you to remember the name Grimma-Mog. Grimma-Mog matters. Remember the name Grimma-Mog. And the time has come to Grimma that Mog. Jude's a little bit suspicious about the difficulty of the job. Like, she might be in over her head here, but that's her favorite place to be. So she goes around town to do a little bit of info gathering and asks the local Fae what's going on here. And they give her the name Grimma Mog. Miss Mog is a red cap, the same as Daddy Matic, and she's also a war general, but she's working for the court of Tik, or at least she was working for them until now, where she is eating other Fae in the mortal world. Next thing we know, Jude is at Grimma Mog's front door with some raw meat and honey sandwiches to try and win her over. And at first, Grimma Mog is stoked because she thinks that the Fae have sent over a mortal sacrifice to try and get her to stop eating the other Fae. And Jude uses this little misunderstanding to her advantage because she's not a noob when it comes to red caps and army generals. Jude knows that red caps have this tradition of dipping a ceremonial hat into the blood of their victims as a trophy. And so this red cap is very precious to red caps. And by the time Jude has figured out where Grimma Mog's hat is, stolen it, and threatened to burn it with a lighter, Grimma Mog realizes who she really is, the daughter of Matic and the exiled seneschal of the High King. Two powerful women, stripped of their titles, now face each other in the mortal world, and Grimma Mog offers Jude a deal. The two of them duel, and if Grimma Mog wins, she gets her hat back. And if Jude wins, she gets her promise that Grimma Mog will stop eating the other folk, and she gets a secret about High King Carden. Jude has a sickness inside of her that can only be fed with morsels of the High King himself, so she tucks the blood-covered hat into her back pocket, and they go to the roof to duel. They're both ruthless. Attack and parry and attack until Jude is pushed to the edge of the roof and her knife is hit out of her hand. She she's forced to grab a random pipe to defend herself, and they both know that this is the end. As a last-ditch effort, Jude pulls Grimamog's hat from her back pocket and throws it at her face, smashing the pipe into her side while she's distracted. And this general has been bested by our little Jude. Grimamog promises to stop eating the folk, and she tells us her secret, which is that Daddy Maddock is working with the Court of Teeth to dethrone Cardan and take over the High Court. Your High King is to be dethroned before the next full moon. How do you like those apples? Oh wait, this is our last first brain jar. Why is that sad? Oh. Jude takes the bus home from this adventure, feeling like she has been hit by a truck. And sitting on the stoop of her apartment building is our favorite clueless mortal, Miss Heather. Apparently Heather comes and sits outside the apartment sometimes to gauge her feelings on the whole Vivi is a fairy and the Fae are real situation, which is devastating. She tells Jude about how confused she is and how scary all of this is, especially the knowledge that Vivi could use magic on her and she would have no idea. And she says that love is stupid. All we do is break one another's hearts. At this point, Jude has fully admitted to herself that she has feelings for Cardan. Although she would never say such a thing out loud, she did marry the guy. And she would just say that was for the power, but we were all there when they cuddled up in bed after. So Jude thinks about how her feelings for him kept her distracted enough to end up in this exile, but even when love makes no sense, it happens anyway. And love has been a little messed up for everyone in the Duarte family since her mother left her fairy husband by pretending to die in a fire. So she says, Heather, listen, Vivi should not have bombarded you with the truth that way, and whether or not you forgive her is entirely up to you. But you should not have your memories erased, because this is the truth of the world, whether you know it or not. So don't get your mind all messed with just because Vivi's delivery sucked. Heather says that she'll think about it, but right now she helps a beaten and battered Jude into her apartment, and when Vivi sees Heather walk in, she is shocked. She's ecstatic, but she's not the only person that's surprised, because sitting on the couch in a full courtly gown is Jude's mirror image, Miss Taryn. Jude and Taryn are not exactly on speaking terms after Taryn effectively betrayed Jude and the future version of Elfame that doesn't extort their baby brother by helping Daddy Maddock steal half of the High King's army and soft quit his job as the general. So seeing Taryn brings out a special kind of violence in Jude with some quotes including, I'd like to put my hands around Taryn's neck and squeeze. Get out or I'll throw you out, and there's nothing I want to hear out of your lying mouth. So, normal, average sister behavior. But Taryn has something important to tell Jude. Something so life-changing, so shocking, so je ne sais quoi, that this is one of my favorite chapters in the entire series. Taryn stands in the middle of a mortal suburban front yard in a gossamer fairy gown. She looks her twin sister in the eyes and says, Locke is dead. He's dead because I killed him. Wait, why is this actually one of the best moments of my life? I hate that man. I hate that man so deeply. Oh my god, this is beautiful. I love this series. Okay. Jude is so much better than me because she actually feels this uncomfortable sense of grief knowing that he's gone. And I would love to dig into the emotional parallels of Locke's murder, the death of the Duarte parents, and the impact that Maddox's values has on his family, and how the butterfly effect of that moment has led to this one. But I already know this video is gonna be really long, so I'm just gonna add Taryn onto the loose ends pathway and continue. It turns out that Taryn tradwifed a little too close to the sun and doesn't actually like it when her husband is gone for weeks at a time, or tells her that she's boring as hell, and then gaslights her into thinking she's crazy for wanting to work on their relationship, so logically, she shoved a letter opener into his throat. I know I shouldn't laugh, but I just hate him so much. These twins may have chosen very different paths in life, but it turns out that they are on similarly murderous journeys. And Taryn says, I thought we were nothing alike, you and I, but it turns out we're just the same. Oof. Taryn doesn't have quite the same murder training that Jude does, so she tried to get rid of Locke's body by pushing him into the ocean, and it was discovered pretty quickly. And now King Carden is questioning relevant parties to figure out who murdered his bestie, and Taryn is the #1 suspect, so she has to face a royal interrogation to prove her innocence. She'll be enchanted to tell the truth and then questioned about Locke's murder, and she literally killed him. So she has come crawling back to the mortal world to ask if Jude will dress up as Taryn and pretend to be her during the royal interrogation so that when she's asked if she killed Locke, she can say, "I didn't kill that man," and be telling the truth. Sure, it would be pretty easy for Jude considering she's protected from fairy magic, but what really gets her going is the chance to see Carden's smug little face again. And also, if she's caught breaking her exile, she'll be executed, so she's dying to do it. But at the same time, she is not really interested in helping Taryn out at the moment. Vivi is the only person here that knows Jude is technically the High Queen of Elfame, so she says, "Tell Taryn what you are, Jude. Tell her what you are, you stupid idiot." And Jude is way too embarrassed, so she just says, "Fine. I'll do the secret mission, okay? I'll go break into Elfame and see the guy that I'm totally not in love with, twist my arm, whatever." And then she stalks off to go and sleep off the fight that she just had with Grima Mog and is still bleeding from. While she sleeps, she has this trippy fever dream, which is so #relatable. I had a fever dream the other night that was a full-length Inception/Looper-esque film about a group of college physicists who time travel in search of the perfect timeline because I went to bed with a tummy ache. Jude's dream brings us through a lot of the main imagery and emotional forces that we've been dealing with throughout the series. It's kind of a mix between her inner turmoil about being a murderer, her fear of mortality, and this wet dream about Carden. There's also this throwback moment to when Jude and Locke were dating in the first book, and they went to this party behind Locke's house, and in real life, Jude spent the party kissing Locke, spending all her time with him, and Carden had these other fae kind of crawling all over him. But in her dream, Locke says to Carden, "I knew you liked her. That's why I had to have her first. Do you remember the party in my maze garden, how I kissed her while you watched?" And Dream Carden says, "I recall that your hands were on her, but her eyes were on me." Dream Carden has so much more game than real life Carden. It's actually insane. And I do think about this scene every time I listen to Guilty as Sin. But then Carden also tells her that she's ugly and old because she's immortal. So it's not all sunshine and rainbows. I would say that the main beats of this dream to keep in mind are that murder comes with guilt. She so badly wants Carden to love her. Nicasia is a bitch. It's really uncomfortable to have a twin that you love in a deeply unique way and yet kind of hate at the same time. Jude loves baby Oak and she so badly wants him to be okay, and she doesn't want to die. This story would not be complete without Jude's own loose ends being all tied up, and with her self-destructive tendencies and craving for power, we just don't know how it will all work out for her in the end. When Jude wakes up from all of that, she pulls Taryn aside for a chat and asks if this whole parent trap situation is actually a trap, and if Taryn is working with Carden to try and get Jude to break the terms of her exile so that he can punish her. Taryn says no and then drops another bomb. She's pregnant. And all I'm saying is if Jude had been in Elfame this whole time, she would have killed Locke before he could have stuck Taryn with a baby. It does kind of explain why Taryn went a little wild and killed her husband, because she knows better than most how awful a bad fairy relationship with a kid on the way can go. So Jude hugs her sister and she thinks, "I know we haven't been kind. I know she's hurt me more than she can guess, but for all of that, she's still my sister. My widowed murderer sister with a baby on the way." Beautiful. Before leaving the mortal realm to face the Inquisition in Taryn's place, Jude gives baby Oak her ruby wedding ring for safekeeping, and then she's off on a magical ragwort steed. It's time to go back to fairyland, back to Carden. But first she's gonna have to prep for this royal inquisition, so she goes to Locke's house, which is completely different now that Taryn has moved in. Taryn's decorated the place with these bright colors and luxurious furnishings, and it's strange for Jude to see this intimate self-expression that doesn't really align with her image of Taryn as this shy, quiet rule follower. Jude eats a little food. You gotta be nourished before pretending to be your twin sister in front of your estranged husband, the High King. She puts on one of Taryn's dresses and the moon and star earrings that she got for Taryn as a wedding gift, and then it's time for a little marital reunion at the palace. Walking through the palace dressed as Taryn gives Jude this strange, unique experience of getting to walk through her former home as an entirely different person. So Jude is not exactly comfortable. And then the camera pans to the throne, slightly out of focus. Back to Jude. She takes a hitched breath. Why is she feeling this way? We return to the shot of the blurred throne, and it focuses, slowly. Carden comes into view, and the only sound we hear is Jude's heartbeat at the sight of her husband, the High King of Elfame, the man who betrayed her, and the man that she loves. The inquisition of Jude as Taryn in regards to Locke's murder begins, and Jude uses this time to take in some key information since she hasn't been to the court in a while. Dearest Nicasia is still here serving as the ambassador to the sea, and shockingly, Lady Asha is also here. Despite telling Jude that she does not want Carden to know about her freedom, apparently she has taken up a place in his court, which is a little strange considering their mother-son relationship. Please see the recap of the prologue in which she gives her child to a cat. And lastly, maybe most importantly, Jude sees that Carden has not filled her empty position of seneschal. They put Jude under an enchantment and they ask her if she murdered Locke, which she denies, duh. And she strategically tries to point a finger toward the sea because that's where Taryn hid his body, and she just wants them to not suspect the Duertes of the murder anymore, but they do not take the bait. They ask if her sister, meaning Jude, was the one to kill Locke, and they bring up the love triangle from book 1 between Jude, Locke, and Taryn, but Jude/Taryn tells them that Locke was not the one that she loved. She loved someone else. He's the one she'd want dead. It's Carden. She's talking about Carden. That should be the end of that, but Nicasia is not buying it. She demands that Jude/Taryn gets searched for any sort of charms that could be allowing her to lie. And Carden says, as you wish, then I suppose I will have to examine you alone in my chambers. And we get the sense that cruel little Carden might be onto her. Uh-oh. Jude is screwed, so she's in full panic mode as she follows Carden down the palace hallway when a random servant bumps into her shoulder, pushes her to the ground, and sneaks a knife into her hand, saying, "Your father is coming for you. Wait for a signal." Yeah, so Maddox would never lead a rescue mission for his deserter daughter, and he is not gonna be happy when he shows up to the palace expecting to find the loyal goody two-shoes and gets Jude instead. But she does have a knife now, and a potential escape from Carden's clutches. They get to the High King's chambers, and the first words out of Carden's mouth change everything. He says, "Well, did you get my letters?" "What letters, Carden? What letters?" Jude's wondering the same thing, okay? But more pressing than that, the jig is up, and Carden knew that it was Jude from the second that he saw her. And this is a very confusing moment for both of them because they have very different perspectives on the last time that they saw each other, and they've been harboring very different feelings during that time. Jude thinks that this discovery of her identity means her death, that Carden always has and always will be coming after her. Carden has been reaching out for months with these mysterious letters and gotten no reply and heard nothing until he hears about Jude's meeting with Grima Mogg, who is known as the General of the Court of Teeth, who are working with Maddox. So he thinks that Jude has been scheming with Maddox again to kill Carden, so he has no idea why she's so afraid of seeing him right now. And before they can reconcile this little miscommunication, the palace explodes. All around them, the room shakes. Shit's falling and breaking, and there are soldiers at the door coming for Carden. And Jude knows that this is the rescue mission that Daddy Maddox sent to save Taryn and kill the High King. Instead of killing Carden and running into her father's arms like both Carden and Maddox expect her to, she starts to plan an escape for both her and Carden so that she can get him out of there without getting murdered and then force him to end her exile as payment for her saving his life. But when Maddox looks at Jude, he sees delicate little Taryn, so he wraps her in his arms and holds a cloth to her mouth to drug her for her protection. And that plan goes out the window. Crazy that Carden could tell it was Jude from the first second he saw her, and Maddox couldn't. Jude wakes up in the woods with stepmomster Oriana, and she realizes that she's gonna have to pretend to be Taryn for a little bit longer in front of her parents, who should in theory know her pretty well. But if she gets caught, then she's going to be murdered by Daddy Maddox, if not imprisoned. And yet all she can think about are those letters that Carden supposedly sent her, and that he thinks that she's working with Maddox now that Maddox rescued her from the palace. Also, Oriana is treating Jude with a lot more kindness than normal, and it really stings since Jude knows it's because Oriana thinks that she's Taryn. She falls back asleep, and the next time that she wakes up, we finally get a reunion with good old Daddy Maddox. Jude, Oriana, and Maddox are in a carriage on the way to Maddox's war camp. Yay! She tells Maddox about her claiming innocence at the Royal Inquisition regarding Locke's murder, and Maddox tells her that he is convinced Carden wants Taryn dead regardless of how the Inquisition went, because when they just had this little rescue mission for Jude/Taryn, the roots of the palace itself fought to keep her there. So Jude thinks, yeah, I'm right to be afraid of this guy. But what she should be thinking is, damn, he really wants me. While Jude tries to keep up her Taryn cosplay, Maddox cracks a joke about Locke being dead. Not the most considerate thing to joke about your daughter's husband being dead to her face, even if she is the one that killed him, and even if it's not really her, it's her twin sister pretending to be her. You know what I mean? Maddox's war camp is deep in the northern mountains just outside of the Court of Teeth, the very same court who tortured my beloved Rochi and his beloved the Bomb, and also that recently gave Grimamog the boot. His camp is filled with a massive army, all prepping to take down the High King, so this is just about the last possible place that Jude wants to be right now. At the camp, Jude finds a familiar face. It's Grimson the blacksmith, who made the blood crown and ended up working with the Undersea to make them a new blood crown until Carden sent them back to the ocean. Seems like Mr. Flip-Flop is on Maddox's side now. Jude gets settled into Maddox's tent and prepares for a dinner with the leaders of the Court of Teeth. And instead of focusing on how the number of people she needs to fool continues to grow, she instead focuses on her dread over a future Elfame potentially ruled by Maddox, and on all of the information she's surrounded by in the heart of the enemy's camp. If she's careful, she can figure out what Maddox is planning. And this is when we all say, no, Jude, please don't, please be good. And she says, fuck you, I'm the queen of Elfame. Buckle up, because it's about to get a little bit dark. Not too dark, but it freaks me out, because we are about to finally be introduced to the royals of the Court of Teeth. They live in the snowy northern mountains, and the icy atmosphere matches their sparkling personalities. Lady Nor and Lord Gerald rule the Court of Teeth with their daughter, Child Queen Surin, who sits on her miniature throne with a bridle attached to her skin and covering her mouth. Here's an example of a horse bridle, if you're having trouble imagining it, except it's on a child in her skin. And if that's not a bad enough vibe, they start off this team dinner by talking about Jude/Taryn as if she's an animal just because she's immortal. Amortal, not immortal. Jude plays the role of obedient daughter, quietly sitting herself in the corner while she tries to suss out the situation. Because it doesn't quite add up to her that Lady Nor and Lord Gerald, with their magically bridled 10-year-old daughter queen and massive icy displays of wealth and power, would want to help Maddox become the High King when they could just try to take the throne for themselves. But all of this talk about stealing the throne brings us to something important, because the overarching question of this book is who should be wearing the crown. In book 1, the question was who will wear the crown, and then will there be a war for the crown in book 2, but now it's firmly on Carden's head despite him not really wanting it. Jude is the queen, but the legitimacy of her power is in question, and both Maddox and the Court of Teeth are willing to fight for this thing. So who should have it? Grimson the blacksmith enters the chat, and all all of the worst people in the room are excited to see him, which feels bad, and they settle into their meal. It's mostly pleasantries and surface level chat, so all that Jude really gets out of the conversation is an invitation from Grimson to come visit him at his forge in the camp. She knows that she'll probably go, but she really doesn't want to. Grimson is not the most fun person to be around. Jude spends most of the dinner terrified that Oriana has figured out she's pretending to be Taryn, and also really uncomfortable with this feeling of resuming her childhood role as the dutiful, powerless daughter at the dinner table. So when she wakes up the next day, she decides to get the heck out of Dodge. It's time to plan. She needs horses, and she needs to get into Maddox's tent to find a map with all of his war secrets. She innocently asks Oriana if Maddox needs anything, trying to get a good excuse to do a little spying, but Oriana just tells her to stay away from Grimson the creep and gives her a little side quest of taking a basket into the woods to gather some berries and plants. While Jude is berry picking, she notices a cave off to the side of the camp, and it's being guarded by some soldiers, so she takes a mental note of this cave, and you should too. Then she decides it's time to visit Grimson, if only so she can steal some magical trinkets of his to help with her escape. So Jude heads over to his forge and looks around at all of these powerful weapons and tools and secret little magic things that Grimson is making for Maddox to take down Carden, and she wonders if any tool could ever be enough to take down a High King that is intrinsically connected to his land. Grimson seems to think so, but then he tells Jude that he isn't sure Maddox appreciates his skills. He hasn't told Grimson that he's a good little boy enough times. Grimson also lets Jude in on a little secret. Every single thing he forges, including the star and moon earrings that Jude is wearing right now, are cursed. If anyone tries to tamper with any of his creations, then something awful and or deadly will happen to them. And he gives her the example of her earrings, saying, "Prize out the gems and your beauty would fade. Not just the extra smidge they grant, but all your beauty, until you were so wretched that the sight of you would set even the folk to screaming." Not the best thing to hear when one of his creations is currently in your body, and Grimson's not the type of dude you want to be alone in a room with, especially when you have to keep saying nice things to him so that he stays chill, and then those nice things go to his head because he thinks that you actually like him, but really you just don't want to be murdered by a metal spider because he feels rejected. You get the vibe. So she scrambles out of there and goes to let off some steam by kicking rocks in the woods. Literally. And then she finds Maddox sitting by a fire at the camp, and I find this version of Maddox to be so interesting, because we've been told by Jude how loving he has been as a father despite his inhumanity, and we've felt the love that Jude has for him despite the things that he's done, but we've never really seen his paternal instincts in action until now when he's faced with fake Taryn. Jude uses the cover of her disguise to pretty much flat out ask him what his plan is for taking the throne, and he says that he's going to hold love and duty over Carden, and he says that there is no banquet too abundant for a starving man, and that he will use this hunger inside of Carden to force him into a duel for the throne. Maddox also brings up the prophecy from Carden's birth, seems like if the guy's gonna be the destruction of the crown and the ruination of the throne, can't be that hard to take him down. Jude thinks this plan is stupid because Carden is not a sword fighter, so he's never going to accept a duel against Maddox, but she knows that if she starts talking strategy, then Maddox might realize she's not actually Taryn, so she crosses her fingers that her disguise is still working, and she asks him a dangerous question: what his plan is for his treacherous daughter, Jude. Maddox acknowledges that out of the three sisters, Jude is the most like him, so he can't help but be proud of her, but her rebellious behavior against her dear dad, who was just trying to provide a good life for his family, must be punished. He also tells this counterfeit Taryn that he thought she was soft and meek, but now that she's killed Locke, he understands her. He then insinuates that Ava, the girl's mother, was awful in a similar way to Locke, which could be true. We don't know the full story of their relationship, but dare I say, I believe women. I will give Maddox credit for understanding the impact he had on the girls, but it still has this self-justified fatherly take. He says, "When I murdered your mother and your father, I changed you. Their deaths were a crucible, the fire in which all three of you girls were forged. Plunge a heated sword into oil, and any small flaw will turn into a crack. But quenched in blood as you were, none of you broke. You were only hardened. Perhaps what led you to end Locke's life is more my fault than yours. If it's hard for you to bear what you did, give me the weight. Dads are so fucked up. And you know the daddy issues run deep, because Jude's immediate feeling is to reassure him and tell him that he's been a great father. But she shoves that feeling down and she stands to leave, and when Maddox tells her that she'll be rewarded for her loyalty, Jude thinks that Taryn would ask him for safety. The one thing he can never truly provide. No matter what promises he would make, he is too ruthless to ever keep anyone safe for long. This is a conclusion, people. You dig and dig and dig at people's breaking points until you just have to wonder how it's all gonna end. Okay, so Jude is still trying to get out of this war camp as quickly as she can, so her plan is to sneak away after dinner to go investigate that cave that she saw earlier, then hop on a reindeer and get out of there. So she packs a little go bag with all the necessities, snacks and poison, and she slips away to the cave. As she gets closer, she realizes there are 3 guards outside of the cave, and she hears a voice from inside. A prisoner of war. And you don't even have to ask, you already know Jude is gonna get involved when she really just needs to get out of here before someone realizes that she's not Taryn. The problem is that with the specifics of the Jude vs. Maddox battles up to this point, there's a good chance that Jude knows who the prisoner is. So, new plan, drop down into the cave from above and pray to the heavens that the guards don't hear her. She gets lucky, they don't hear anything, and inside this dark, freezing cavern, the prisoner calls her name. She walks toward him, and the torchlight reveals a chained and tortured ghost. Yeah, the same ghost that betrayed Jude by handing her over to the sea, which did then lead to the worst torture that she's ever had to endure, and Jude's not about to rescue the guy that handed her over to her captors. To his credit, the ghost is like, hey, fair enough. I know I deserve this. And Jude gets to ask him why. Why did he do this? And we get a little story from this double agent spy. Way back in the day, when Prince Dane was sleeping with his father's mistress, Liriope, and got her pregnant with baby Oak, Dane ordered the ghost to kill Liriope with blusher mushroom, and Ghosty felt so guilty about murdering an innocent pregnant woman that he went to her son Locke and gave him a gift. The ghost told Locke his true name. Now in Fairy, a true name is a really powerful thing because it gives someone total control over you, similar to the way that Jude had control over Carden when he swore himself to her, but knowing someone's true name gives you endless control over them because it can't be changed. The ghost says that at first Locke only asked him to do a little bit of spying, no biggie, but then Locke ordered him to betray Jude with the whole handing her over to the Undersea thing as a favor for Nicasia. And if you're wondering how a favor ended with the ghost in Maddox's weird torture cave, well, part of Locke's dowry to Maddox for Taryn's hand in marriage was the ghost's true name. So now Maddox has complete control over someone that was very closely trusted by his number one enemy, Carden. And also Jude. So now is when we all say, sorry, Ghosty. He did still murder an innocent woman, but the rest was physically out of his control. And the blame goes to one of the worst men to ever not actually exist, Locke himself. And now we don't know how Ghosty is gonna survive as a tool for the enemy. Another loose end. The ghost turns to Jude and says, hey, my life sucks now. I'm being controlled by Maddox and Locke. So just give me the gift of killing me painlessly here and now. But Jude knows she can't kill him. This is the ghost. The man that taught her how to spy and who served her as a member of the Court of Shadows and who is now as powerless as she once was as a mortal child in fairyland with no protection from fairy magic. So new plan. Stay in Maddox's war camp for one more day as Taryn, steal the keys to the ghost chains which are back in Grimson's forge, boo, and then get out of town with both of them alive. Back in Jude's tent, she finds someone waiting up for her with some uncomfortable questions. Stepmomster Oriana knows that she is not Taryn. She is so screwed. Jude does the only thing she can when facing this woman who has never really been a mother to her and who holds Jude's fate in her hands. She tells the truth. She says, listen, I genuinely do not want to be here right now. I had no idea that Matic was coming to rescue Taryn at the palace, and I was already there pretending to be her for the royal questioning. I had no choice, so maybe don't tell Matic? And then maybe you can help me get out of here by writing Vivi a letter telling her to come pick me up, and then telling Matic that Taryn went to visit Vivi and Oak in the human world, and then Matic won't freak out and I won't die and you'll never have to see me again? Maybe, please? Oriana is kind of into this plan. Her number one priority is to keep Matic focused on taking the throne from Cardan, because if Matic has the throne for himself, then little baby Oak can come back to Elfame without the risk of Matic trying to use him for power. So even though Oriana is kind of team Jude doesn't know what she's doing and is literally just a little girl, she decides to help her out. Go mom. Kind of. While Oriana writes this letter to Vivi telling her to come pick up Jude/Taryn, she also tells Jude that Lady Asha, Cardan's mother, who we as readers see pretty negatively, used to be friends with Ava, Jude's mother, who we've never really gotten to know, but as the main character's dead mother, you have a predisposition to sympathize for. But Oriana says that Ava had a great appreciation for wickedness, which I'll tell you right now is not like foreshadowing or hinting at things to come, but it's this little nod to the theme of nature versus nurture and the question of who are we and when are we forged that Holly Black has running through the series as a whole. And it's just a standout moment to me because it adds complexity to this character that we hear about often but we never really get to know because the main character has such limited knowledge on who she was. And if all you know about someone is your projected idea of them, then you don't really know them at all, even if they're your mom. Oriana also talks about Lady Ash's greed and cruelty and how pissed Eldred was when Cardan was born and given that like Zeus level prophecy. And Jude thinks about how Cardan was raised by this woman that didn't want to be a mother and a father that dealt with his fate by ignoring him, and how that must have made Cardan starving for love. So maybe Matic has a point in trying to use love and loyalty against the young High King. Oriana sends the letter to Vivi telling her to come pick up Jude ASAP, and then the next day she gives Jude all of these chores to keep her busy and out of trouble. By the time night comes and Jude is just itching to get into trouble, the stepmomster comes and tells Jude to take some tea and biscuits into Matic's war tent. This is a dangerous request for a Jude that has been scheming and plotting, and it's also dangerous because Matic asked for her specifically, and there's a good chance that he's figured out she's not Taryn. So Jude is mentally preparing for the worst, and when she brings the tea to Matic and he's in a good mood, she feels even worse about the situation. He could be in a good mood just because he loves war, or he could be in a good mood because he's about to smite down his lying, backstabbing daughter. She's paranoid, but she has good reason to be, and even with all of that paranoia, she still manages to take a tiny peek at the war map that Matic has laid out with his plan of attack for Elfame. And thankfully all Matic does is tell her that she doesn't have to share a tent with him and Oriana anymore. So she goes back to her new tent to get it all set up, and Miss Oriana comes to tell her that Vivi has already sent a reply. The plan is for Vivi to fly in on a horse the next day and pick Jude up just outside of camp. This could be good or bad for Jude depending on how quickly Vivi gets there, because she still has to steal a key from Grimson to help the ghost escape before she leaves. There's a lot to do. When she has a moment alone, Jude grabs some wine and puts a little bit of death sweet into it, just enough to make the guards by Ghosty's cave fall asleep for a while. And then she has one final dinner with Matic and the company. I eat with Matic one final time. I pinch some color into my cheeks and rake back my hair into a fresh braid. And if I am particularly kind that evening, particularly deferential, if I laugh particularly loudly, it is because I know I will never do this again. I will never have him behave like this with me again. But for one final night, he's the father I remember best, the one in whose shadow I have, for better or worse, become what I am. I mean, this book is so well written that I think this kind of passage speaks for itself, but this is a final goodbye for Jude. This section of the story is always really emotional to me, really starting at this point, because I just think that to choose the greater good over your family, your parent who raised you with their version of love and who you most most resemble is really difficult. Like, to love someone so deeply and recognize that they're operating with an intention to hurt not just you and your family, but an entire kingdom of people with what they believe is justice, and to stand against them, like, so what? I just think Jude is really strong for making the decision to stand up to Matic, even if it means not getting to have somebody that she loves in her life in the same way ever again, and that this kind of decision can be really relevant to the real world today. So what? Sue me! Because this is the final turning point for Jude, and because she knows that there is no way forward but on the opposite side of a battlefield, it's time to add Matic to the loose end stack. And all that's left is to see who comes out on top. Jude goes to bed in Maddox's camp for the last time, expecting to wake up for a morning of thievery and escape. And instead she wakes up with a hand covering her mouth, and she automatically starts throwing punches, which gets some laughter in the room. Weird, right? Wrong. Jude's Court of Shadows has come to rescue her, and she has just punched High King Carden in the groin. Rochi and Carden are operating on their own get Jude out of there mission now, but it kind of messes with Jude's plan. Like, there are just too many cooks in the kitchen at this point, because Ghosty is in a cave, Vivi and Taryn are on their way, Oriana knows what her true identity is, and now the Roach and Carden are here too. Disaster. It's a disaster. Jude looks at Carden, the king dressed up as one of her spies, an arrogant smile on his face, and she says, "You should not be here right now. What are you doing?" To which the Roach replies, "I said that too. Really? I miss the days when you were in charge." I love this man. I love this man. God. We find out, stay with me here, that after Jude was rescued by Matic, Carden went to visit Vivi in the mortal realm, and she showed him the letter that Oriana had written her about rescuing Jude/Taryn, and Vivi thought the letter was a trap. This revelation about the events leading up to this moment forces all of us, including Jude, to imagine High King Carden in the mortal realm for the very first time. Jude wonders what he thought about her apartment, and whether or not he pardoned Taryn when he wouldn't pardon her, because even married to the guy, she's still a jealous queen. Oh my god, no pun intended. So Jude and Carden are still painfully confused about each other at this point, but the fact that he showed up to rescue her makes Jude think there is potential for her to still be pardoned from her exile. Carden and Rochi are ready to take Jude and run, but Jude has this whole escape plan she still needs to go through, and Carden, as first of all the king, and second of all someone who really wants Jude to be safe, doesn't love the idea of sticking around for all of her schemes. Rochi puts an end to their bickering and says, "Okay, people, it's time to put all our cards on the table here because we gotta go." So Jude puts it all out there. She tells them that they need to help her rescue a prisoner, that she's seen what Grimson is making in his forge, and that she knows what Maddox's attack plan is. And she'll give them all the details if they pardon her exile, to which Carden replies, "Okay. Yeah, when we're back, you're free." Now that her freedom is secured, she tells them that they need to break into Grimson's forge to steal the key to free the prisoner, and that the prisoner is the one and only Ghost, their betrayer. But she explains the whole evil against his will, used his true name situation, and they agree to help. So, a Roach, an assassin king, and the Queen of Nothing break into a forge. They know going into this that the king of scary inventions is gonna have his forge booby-trapped out the wazoo, so they aren't all that surprised when they pull the cave key off the wall and a bunch of arrows just start raining down on them. But don't freak, Carden protects Jude by covering her with his sword-proof cloak. That doesn't really help the Roach though, who does get hit with an arrow and it is poisoned, and we don't know if he's gonna live. So, how is he going to confess his feelings to the bomb if he's poisoned to death? And now there's a blaring alarm going off in the forge, waking up the entire camp, so things are falling apart pretty quickly here. They need to abort the mission, so Carden wants to hop on the magic horses that he has in his pocket, but Vivi and Taryn are waiting for them in the woods, so he wraps Jude up in his armored cloak, he scoops Rochi into his arms, and they run for the woods. But at the last second, Jude turns and runs for the caves. She can't leave one of her spies behind. Inside the cave, Ghosty is gone, and waiting in his place is Daddy Matic, who says, "I'm afraid you're too late," and draws his sword to fight his daughter. Guys, this is so messed up. She doesn't even have a sword on her. I hate this part. We all knew that a real Jude-Matic final showdown would happen at some point, but apparently it's happening now, as Jude stands with a tiny dagger and Cardan's sword-proof cloak against the man that led the High King's army and also trained her in fighting. Jude needs this to be quick, because if the ghost is gone, it means he's been sent to hunt down Cardan, and Jude can't beat Matic in a fight even on a good day. When Matic sees that Jude really is going to stand for Cardan and against him, he says, "You're still loyal to that puppet. Why, Jude? Wouldn't it be better if he took an arrow through the heart in his own hall? You cannot believe he makes a better High King than I would." And Jude replies, "Maybe I believe that it's time for Elfame to be ruled by a queen. Slay, queen." Just smile through the pain. Matic has only seen Jude and Cardan's relationship through the lens of Jude needing Cardan to give her power, rather than having her own power, and then being exiled and stripped of the little power that she did have. So he thinks she's being ridiculous, and once again patronizes her, saying, "That boy is your weakness. But worry not, his reign will be short. Surrender, child, it's time to submit to your punishment." She knows she can't fight him head on, she only has a knife. So Jude turns and runs, and in a chilling deja vu of the day her parents were murdered, Matic yells out, "Do not run from me," and chases her down. Jude does not want to lead Matic to where her sisters are waiting for her, but she can't seem to lose him in the woods, so she stops, pulls out her knife, and stabs him in the side. But that's not enough to stop the Grand General. He backhands her to the ground, and maybe because he still loves this mortal reflection of himself too much to kill her, or maybe because war strategy is in his bones, he begins to wear Jude down with blow after blow from his sword, just weak enough to tire her out quickly, so she knows she won't last much longer. And when Matic swipes his blade across her cloak and sees that he can't pierce it, he wraps her cloak around his hand, yanking her toward him, and he plunges his blade through her side and into her stomach. Jude and Matic look at each other in surprise, and Jude thinks, somehow, despite knowing better, part of me still believed he would pull a killing blow. Matic, who was my father ever since he murdered my father. Matic, who taught me how to swing a sword to actually hit someone and not just their blade. Matic, who sat me on his knee and read to me and told me he loved me. I fall to my knees. My legs have collapsed under me. His blade comes free, slick with my blood. My leg is wet with it. I am bleeding out. Before Matic has a chance to kill his child with a final blow, arrows fly through the woods and strike him in the shoulder and chest, and out from a tree steps Vivi and Taryn. Then a third person steps out from behind them. Heather? No. Grimma freaking Mog. Vivi is the first to speak. She points her bow at Matic and tells him to stay where he is or she'll kill him. Matic looks back to Jude, who's holding the gash on her side and bleeding out fast, and he says, "She's not going to make it. Let me..." But Vivi fires more arrows at him, keeping him still. The blood loss is too much for Jude to handle, and she drops down to her knees. Even Taryn knows that this is getting bad fast. She steps to Jude's side, holding her up, and this is when Grimma Mog gets involved. She says, Matic, your child challenged me just a week back. Now I know who she really wanted to kill." Matic can see that he's in a tough spot, because at least a small part of him doesn't want Jude to die, and even though he has an entire army like a few trees away, he's surrounded at the moment. So he turns to Grimma Mog and says, "Hey, you could come work for me. We could take down the High Court together." Unbeknownst to Daddy Matic, she is kind of first in line for that open position of Grand General at said High Court. So she turns him down, and Matic is forced to face what he has done. He tells Jude to come back to camp, that she's going to die, but she refuses. So he says, "Goodbye then, daughter. You would have made a good red cap." And then he walks away. And for Matic, the story of a father who has sacrificed everything for his children only to be rewarded with betrayal has finally ended in the way that he always knew it would. For everyone else, panic sets in because Jude really is about to die. But this loose end is not tied yet. She tries to shake herself away to get focus, so she tells her sisters to shove a bunch of leaves and dirt into her wound and then sew it up. They think that she's reached the delusional stage of blood loss, but Jude has a theory about her connection to the land now that she's the High Queen. And Taryn says, "Wait, what do you mean she's the High Queen?" And then Grimma Mog says, "Oh my god, you guys are crazier than I thought." But then she rallies them together saying, hey, the queen gave us an order, ladies, let's get to it. At this point, Jude is fighting to stay conscious, so everything is a blur as Taryn desperately sews her up, and they all try not to cry while they watch their sister bleed out in the snow. And then Jude starts to gain back some feeling, some strength. And when she looks around, she sees that where her blood touched the ground, flowers have bloomed, even through the snow. Grimamog kneels before her, and it all comes together. She is the High Queen. The land has chosen her, and so has Grimamog, so she gets back to work. The ghost is still on the hunt for Cardan, so Jude decides to take a flying horse to get back to the palace as fast as possible, and she tells Grimamog to protect her sisters. Taryn gives Jude Nightfell, her sword, and then she takes one of Jude's hands and Vivi takes the other, and they stand together as a united front despite everything that they've been through. And Jude sets off into the night, and as she flies over the snowy woods of her father's war camp, still alive and still the High Queen, she looks down at her sisters, knowing that they risked everything to come save her. Oh my god. And this is the first loose end to get tied, because nothing can break these girls apart. Not even a little betrayal. Jude is flying toward the palace without much of a plan. No one in Elfame knows that Cardan isn't gonna enforce her exile, so if she's seen, she'll be captured. And the last time that she saw the Court of Shadows lair, the ghost had destroyed it. So all that she knows is the roach has been shot and the ghost is coming to kill the king, so she needs to move fast. She starts by sneaking into Maddox's house, home sweet home, mostly because she knows nobody is going to be there and she needs to change her clothes and take a peek at the new hole in her side, and also give herself a sick new makeover. Gargoyle mask and fancy little loot included. She doesn't know if she'll be able to get into the palace, so she brings a note with her that says, expect an assassination attempt, most likely in the Great Hall. Keep the High King in seclusion, with the hopes that at the very least she'll be able to hand this warning off to someone. At the palace, she does manage to sneak in with this big group, and she also makes a trade with a musician. She gives them the fancy little loot that she brought with her in exchange for a promise that they will pass her warning note off to someone on the living council. Then in the Great Hall, she climbs to the rafters to get a better view of the situation and have a place to wait for the ghost. And yeah, it does take a really long time because she is pulling at her stitches and just lost half the blood in her body because her dad almost killed her. She watches the party below as people dance and familiar faces file in throughout the night, like Lady Asha and the Living Council, and eventually Cardan. It's very confusing for Jude because a few hours ago he was breaking into Grimson's forge and carrying the roach to safety, and now he's regally entertaining his citizens and is the version of Cardan that Jude is the most afraid of. Jude can see Randolin showing Cardan her warning note, and then she notices the bomb searching through the rafters for an attacker. But the bomb doesn't find the ghost, she finds Jude. And then Jude realizes that she's made a bit of an oopsie. A double oopsie, even, because this is what Maddox wanted all along. His plan was to scare Jude into thinking that the ghost was hunting down Cardan, so that Jude would then break her exile by going into Fairy and get captured as the assassin coming for the king. And then on top of that, the note that Jude wrote told them exactly how to find her. This idiot! She dodges arrows from the bomb only to slip and fall from her ledge, crashing very dramatically onto a table in the middle of the court. To everyone there, it looks like this mortal girl that was in exile has come crashing down into the party during an attempt to kill the king. The royal guards come forward to capture this evil assassin, and as they close in, Cardan says, "Halt! Do not touch her. She is my wife, the rightful High Queen of Elfame, and most definitely not in exile." It only took the entire first half of this book, but we've done it, people. There is officially a mortal High Queen of Elfame, and her name is Jude Duarte. Boom! Against the fairies of the fire, she with tidal spirits waged war, and earth and air and ocean felt how fierce the battle raged. High she shook her shining falcon, pliant as the Russian plant. Falcon her dwarf lover forged her, hard and bright as adamant. Fighting by the El King's side, there she the lord of Fireland slew. All the hosts of fire were rooted, crowned her queen, the conquering crew. Back to fairyland she hasted, home her train in triumph drew. Philip James Bailey, A Fairy Tale. I love that one. Holly Black really lets it all go in this half with Jude and Cardan. It is the insanity that we've been waiting for so long. And by that, I mean we get like a few chaste brushes of skin and the suggestion of feelings. It's incredible. Jude passes out on the table from blood loss and from falling from the ceiling, and she comes to, but only briefly enough to realize that she's safely tucked into Cardan's bed, and he is very diligently taking care of her. Slutty, puffy white t-shirts and sleeves rolled up included. And then she falls back asleep, and when she wakes up for real, she's alone. She freshens up a bit. She's kind of disgusting after almost dying twice, and then she heads to her old seneschal rooms to see if she can find any clean clothes. But her rooms aren't empty. Baby Oak is there, having some dinner and waiting to see if Jude died. Oak tells Jude that he is not the only one here from the mortal world. Vivi, Taryn, and Heather came too. They all come into her room and it's very sweet. They've been really worried about her because Vivi and Taryn had no way of knowing what was happening after Jude left for the interrogation regarding Locke's murder. And then there was all the craziness of Cardan showing up and Grim and Mogg coming along. And then their dad stabs Jude, and a few hours later she's declared the High Queen of Alfheim and the wife of her mortal enemy. It's a lot. And right on time, the mortal enemy in question, Jude's dearly beloved, is at the door. These two lovebirds have a lot to talk about because even though the news is out that Jude is pardoned and the High Queen, they haven't really caught up with each other. And Jude is still convinced that Cardan is trying to ruin her life slowly and painfully. But when Cardan says, very properly, walk with me, Jude heads out into the palace with him. Really, they have to go to a living council meeting, but no one cares about that. The important thing is that these two need to talk, and we get some post-war camp updates. The Roach has survived Grimson's poison arrow, but he is in a coma, so his future is still up in the air. Daddy Maddock has sent word to the court that he believes his daughter Jude is dead. He plans on challenging Cardan for the High Throne, and he is currently out campaigning to all of the lower courts in order to build up his presence in Elfheim, and also he wants them to come watch him challenge Cardan for the throne. Then we get to the good stuff. Jude can't take this anymore. She hates not knowing what Cardan is thinking and planning, so she says, look, whatever it is swirling around in that big fancy head of yours, just tell me. Just threaten me to my face so that we can move on. Cardan realizes that they've got a few more things to work through than he initially thought, so he pulls Jude out to the royal gardens for a bit more privacy, and I might add, a more romantic atmosphere. And we get to see what it looks like when two people with painfully suppressed emotions try to have an honest conversation with each other. Cardan kicks us off by telling Jude that when she was falling from the rafters of the ceiling, he was terrified for her, and he's not used to feeling that way about the indestructible Jude. And Jude says, mortals are fragile. And he says, not you. You never break. And he also tells her that the letters he sent her while she was in exile were mostly just him begging her to come back to Elfheim. This is the insanity I'm talking about, people. Jude is eating it up and then immediately ragging on herself for liking him. She's like trying to mentally Pavlov herself out of having feelings for him, but that's not gonna work. We know that's not going to work. She's also still looking for the trick here because all of this kindness doesn't add up. Why would Cardan be begging her to come back to Elfheim when he's the one that exiled her in the first place? Well, Cardan's exact words were, I exile Jude Duarte to the mortal world until and unless she is pardoned by the crown. At that point, Jude was already the queen, aka the crown. She was fully capable of pardoning herself. I love that this reveal lets readers feel vindicated in figuring out the riddle pretty easily because it's not upheld as this like grand masterful trick. Cardan is literally like, how did you not figure this out? But Jude's steadfast belief that Cardan is out to get her wouldn't let her see the answer. It's beautiful to us. Jude, on the other hand, does not love being the butt of this joke, so she slaps Cardan in the face. It's kind of deserved. And we all know that Cardan likes a little bit of cruelty. Ba-doom-tsh. Thank you. In Cardan's mind, Jude is like this godly, undefeatable, all-powerful cockroach that should be feared and admired. So he thought she would like it if he threw some of her clever cruelty back at her, and to be honest, they're both kind of sick freaks. Like, Cardan didn't hate torturing Jude with the whole exile thing, and Jude has always reveled in outwitting and outplaying Cardan. But now that this has been cleared up, and we know Jude has these nasty little feelings for Cardan, and that he was never really trying to get rid of her, we start frothing at the mouth for a juicy little love confession. It's just been teed up so beautifully. This is an honest, safe space for Jude and Cardan. They're admitting things that they never have before. It's the last book in the series. Is it happening? Can we finally breathe easy? No. Just when it seems like we'll get a full-blown Pride and Prejudice moment, Cardan kills the mood by bringing up this prophecy that is looming over everyone's head. And rather than confessing his love, he confesses that he is afraid it will turn him into a monster if he really is going to be the destruction of the crown and the ruination of the throne. He says, "And if I fulfilled that prophecy, I ought to be stopped. And I believe that you would stop me." And he's right. Jude is happy to kill him if he turns into some awful king hell-bent on destroying Elfame. Even Jude is a little bit disappointed that there's no love talk, but it's time for a meeting with the Living Council. Every single time there's a meeting with the Living Council in the whole series, I think of that Hamilton song that's like, "The issues on the table." And I don't know how to write that into this in any way, shape, or form, but I have to get it off my chest. So what if I'm a Lin-Manuel Miranda enjoyer? God. The council is waiting for Jude and Maddox in their royal chambers, and they mostly just want the quick and dirty of Jude's time at Maddox's war camp and the information that she got there. Like what Grimson was making and how Maddox wants to duel Cardan for the throne, and they also use this time to make it very clear that they are not happy that they had no say in who Cardan chose to marry. And that just makes Cardan kick them out of the room. Their next visitor is the beautiful and talented The Bomb, who is here to finally help Jude with her nasty sword wound from Daddy Maddox, which still has not been properly addressed. So The Bomb kicks Cardan out of their room to get to work, creating another iconic Jude Cardan moment, because Cardan doesn't want to be kicked out. He says, "This is my room, and that is my wife." But The Bomb says that he needs to leave so that she can fix Jude's stitches, and Jude, feeling a little bit spicy at being reunited with her bestie The Bomb, says, "Oh, I don't know, maybe he'd like to hear me scream." To which Cardan replies, "I would, and perhaps one day I will." These whores! While The Bomb is yanking out the stitches that Taryn gave to Jude in the woods, a messenger comes in with a request from Lady Asha. Jude's mother-in-law is demanding that Jude meet her in her chambers, and so Jude says, "Okay, well, I'll be there in a minute. I'm a little bit busy right now." And then The Bomb proceeds to scold her, saying, "You're the Queen of Elfame. Act like it." Because Lady Asha should be coming to Jude, not the other way around. The Bomb is a real one. When Jude is all fixed up, she starts to make her way to Lady Asha's rooms, and she runs into Val Morin. Every time we've run into Val Morin, who was High King Eldred's mortal seneschal, it's been extremely weird, and Jude's over it. So when Val Morin says, "Damn, why are you being so testy?" Jude says, "Well, what makes you think you deserve my kindness?" Jude has this bone-deep loyalty for humankind as someone that was an outcast for her humanity. And Val Morin was this mortal in a really powerful position that never showed any loyalty to her or to Taryn. But Val Morin says, "Girl, you and I are not the same. You were raised among the Fae. We are entirely different." And he walks away. Val Morin always pops in to show us something about Jude that no one else can, because even though he's immortal, he's lived a very different life in Fairy than she has. And this time he shows us that even though Jude will never be Fae, she's also not fully human. She's stuck somewhere in between. When Jude does get to Lady Asha's rooms, she is not received with the respect of the High Queen. Lady Asha is bedridden because of all the craziness going on, even though it literally has no effect on her, and she expects to be respected because technically she's the High King's mother. And I say technically because she did not raise him, and she describes him to Jude by saying, "Cardan was not an easy child to love, and he's only grown worse with time. He would scream to be held, and then once picked up, he would bite and kick his way out of my arms. He would find a game and obsess over it until it was conquered, then burn all the pieces. Once you're no longer a challenge, he will despise you." and she tells Jude that she's already doomed because she loves Cardan. Knowing that Cardan was raised without love and always wanting of it, and that she was raised with this deep-rooted feeling of shame and fear of failure, Jude wonders if she's been going about this all wrong. She thinks, maybe it isn't the worst thing to want to be loved even if you're not, even if it hurts. Maybe being human isn't always being weak. We've hit a thesis. This entire series, Jude's been fighting tooth and nail to be something that she's not so that she can have power, the ultimate success. But now that she is the queen of fairy and still immortal, she can finally see that regardless of status, being who she is and wanting and feeling is not equal to being powerless. It's not a bad thing at all. The main character is going to be okay, and it's not even the end of the book yet. Let's go! With this new moral belief solidifying in the foundation of Jude as a person, she turns to Lady Asha, the queen of disrespect, am I right? And she takes a shot in the dark. She says, oh, so the reason you stopped Cardan's letters from ever getting to me was because you're afraid that he loves me and that I'll always have more power than you, huh? And Lady Asha cannot deny it, because it's the truth. Jude leaves Lady Asha with the knowledge that she plans on taking her role as High Queen very seriously. And then a guard finds her in the hallway to tell Jude that the Undersea is in the throne room, which is never a good sign. When Jude walks into the throne room, Nicasia is there with some Undersea soldiers, and we find out the consequences of another Daddy Maddox strategy. Instead of sending the ghost after Cardan, like Jude thought that he would, Maddox sent him after Queen Orla, and the ghost shot her with a magical arrow that stopped just before her heart. Apparently Maddox has control over this arrow, so he can force it to go into her heart and kill her from wherever and whenever he wants, which means that Maddox has dangerous leverage over the Undersea and could force them to fight against Cardan in this battle for the throne, and we already know how destructive that would be via the second book in the series. But there isn't much that Cardan and Jude can do about that right now, so they kind of just say, yeah, sorry, and focus on a more immediate threat to them, which is that the ghost still hasn't been caught. So he could be on his way to the palace with another magical arrow, this time for the king. They decide they need to rethink their strategy to prepare for an attack from Maddox, and most of the planning they do is logistical back and forth about what could potentially happen and how they would deal with it, with the Undersea as a possible new enemy being quite the sticking point. A soldier comes over to Jude and tells her that Taryn has left her a message telling Jude to get to Hollow Hall ASAP. Literally nothing good has ever happened in the history of Elfame at Hollow Hall, which is Baelkin's old house where he has tormented both Jude and Cardan. So Jude knows that this has to be an emergency and she wants to leave immediately. Cardan, of course, is like, oh, I'll come with you. And Jude can't really stop him because he's the High King, so he skips out the door behind her. Hollow Hall has a talking door, which tells Jude and Cardan that Taryn is inside, in the dungeons, with the other, which raises some red flags. Taryn is literally just chilling in the basement, but she wasn't expecting Cardan and some of the royal guard to come with Jude, so she's a bit flustered. She tells them that this unseen other person that she's with was sent by Maddox, and when he found Taryn instead of Jude, he told her to restrain him or that things would get bad fast. Anyone got any guesses? This one's a little bit obvious, I feel, but it's the ghost, and he is currently shackled in a 12-foot deep pit and not looking so great. The ghost fills them in on his undersea adventure to shoot Queen Orla with a magical arrow, and then Cardan asks him if Maddox gave him any other orders. It gives me shivers. The ghost pulls this David Blaine escape artist move and shakes off his shackles, then starts crawling up the pit walls like a creature determined to kill the king. But then he stops. Taryn says, Larkin Gorm Garrett, forget all other commands but mine. And now not only do we know the ghost's true name, okay, Larkin Gorm Garrett, but so does Jude and Cardan. And this is a big deal. Jude has never heard anyone use a fairy's true name before. And she is thrilled that Taryn brought her in on this instead of trying to hide the ghost away like some sort of trick up her sleeve. Burnt bridges can be rebuilt one step at a time, people. And the ghost is free from Matic now. They leave the dungeons, and Taryn pulls a rare sibling dub and throws a bit of attitude Carden's way because she thinks he's still manipulating Jude, and she's a little bit traumatized from being in an awful relationship with Carden's bestie Locke. So she's like, you guys suck and all you do is play games. And even though from her perspective she's right, Carden does kind of own her back, and he says, unlike Locke, I never thought love was a game. Damn, like condemning your dead bestie and Loki telling your wife that you love her in the same sentence. That's crazy. With this ghosty plot twist, they're gonna have to reorganize a little bit. Since Maddox saw Jude die, he probably doesn't know that she's the queen, and Carden decides that it's in everyone's best interest if they hide the ghost away from everybody, including the living council, so that no one knows they have the ghost. So they want to hide him away with the bomb. On the ride back to the palace, Carden chats Taryn up about all of these silly mortal world things like candies and slushies, and when they get back and Taryn and Jude have a moment alone, Taryn is like, he was only being nice to me because he wants you to like him, and he cannot be trusted. She actually says it much more nicely than that, and she's never seen Jude and Carden's weirdly perfect dynamic up close before, so her hesitancy does make sense, and it goes over Jude's head regardless. She just goes back to the royal chambers, puts on some of Carden's clothes, and tucks into bed, safe in the comfort of her own denial. When Jude wakes up, she is still alone, and she doesn't know if it's because Carden was gambling in the Court of Shadows or partying in the Great Hall to avoid her. All she knows is that he never came to bed. Damn! Someone is banging on Jude's door, so she puts on some clothes and opens it to a rude intrusion from Sir Randallin. Jude decides to take the bomb's advice to heart, and instead of entertaining this disregard of her station, she marches into the hall, looks her guards in the eyes, and says, who let this loser into my rooms without asking me first? No one fesses up, but one of Jude's classmates from way back in the day is here, and she's a soldier now, and she's ready to serve Jude with actual loyalty and a brain. So Jude promotes her to be the first member of her personal guard. She's making like queenly decisions now. She goes back inside to deal with Randallin, who tells us that a bunch of the lower courts are coming to the palace to see Maddox's challenge for the throne, and that Maddox will be here in a few days. And then Randallin basically says like, hey, have you actually ever considered maybe quitting your job as the High Queen? And Jude says, whoa, no, I hadn't thought about relinquishing my position as one of the most powerful people in Elfame and the first mortal High Queen ever. Randallin here is worried about the optics of having a mortal High Queen now that the eyes of the lower courts are on them and Daddy Maddox is coming for blood. He thinks that it will be harder for Carden to get support if Jude is standing next to him. Before Jude can really dig into him, someone comes into the room and Randallin, thinking that it's like a guard or a servant, says, F off! And then he turns to find that High King Carden is at the door, and he's not alone. Grimma you just got mogged, is right behind him with soup. Carden says, hey, Jude, can I talk to Randallin for a sec? And Jude replies, I don't need anyone to help me tell Randallin that this is my home and my land and that I am going nowhere and relinquishing nothing. And yet, Carden says, clamping his hand on the back of the counselor's throat, there are still some things I would say to him. There's a flurry of activity as people start to officially move Jude's belongings over to the royal chambers, and Heather comes in to tell Jude that she and Vivi are going to go home soon before Maddox comes to murder everybody. So Carden says, you guys should come to this party tonight before you leave because, well, why not? What the hell? War is coming in the form of the story's only father figure, so might as well have a little fun before he gets here. This party is kind of a big deal, and not just because everyone's gathered to see Maddox's performance in a few days, but also because Jude is officially debuting to the people of Elfame as their queen. There's going to be a lot of political sucking up to the court rulers so that they feel confident their first ever mortal High Queen will be able to take down her dad. Everyone's feeling a bit tense, and we all know that schmoozing with the people is not Jude's strong suit, but she does her best, and she lets the people kiss her hand, and she tells them not to worry about the war that's coming, that it will be over soon, and they will win, and everything's gonna be fine. She also tells this to Lord Royben, who came to the party with his girlfriend Kay, who got hurt in the last book when Jude was being held captive by the Undersea and they attacked the land, but she survived. Kay is okay. Then Jude bumps into Heather and we get a relationship update on these star-crossed lovers. It's kind of a surprise that Heather is in Elfame at all, because when she talked to Jude at the beginning of the book, she still wasn't sure how she was feeling about everything, but now she tells Jude that she's made a deal with Vivi. As long as they're in Fairy, Heather and Vivi will be together, but as soon as they go home, Vivi is gonna erase all of Heather's memories. She'll forget all of her time in Fairyland and everybody that she met, including Vivi. They're just so unbelievably Romeo and Juliet. Heather doesn't even want to go through with the deal anymore. She just wants to be with Vivi, but it's too late because a fairy's promise is binding and Vivi promised to erase Heather's memory. So now they're staying in Elfame for longer and longer because they don't want to go home, even though Daddy Matic is on a warpath headed straight for them. It's awful. Cardan makes a speech to his people on the eve of war. He says, "Seelie and unseelie, wild folk and shy folk, I'm glad to have you march under my banner, glad of your loyalty, grateful for your honor. To you I offer honey wine and the hospitality of my table, but to traitors and oath-breakers I offer my queen's hospitality instead, the hospitality of knives." And we get a reminder that these people know Jude as the daughter of Grand General Matic and the murderer of Prince Baelkin and the exiled queen of Elfame. And if anyone knows how to make people fall in love with Jude Duarte, it's High King Cardan. Speaking of which, they do go back to the royal chambers after the party, and it's freaking on, you guys. Yeah, they're going all the way. I don't know how to say it and not sound like your wine-drunk millennial aunt, but I think the key takeaways here are that Jude does in fact have game when she wants to, and they both have a wonderful time even though they're a little bit nervous. And Cardan tells Jude that he is forever undone by her, which is not painful at all to hear when you're unbearably single. But don't let this moment of happiness fool you, okay? We've only reached the tip of the fear and devastation iceberg at this point. So everyone gets back to prepping for the war. They have not heard anything from the Undersea yet, and Jude is really afraid that Matic is somehow going to convince Cardan to duel him, which would just mean game over immediately. And then, just like that, the moment arrives. Matic is here and he is asking for a parley, pirate style. He and his retinue get to come inside and have a friendly little chat with the High Court, and then when they still disagree about who should be on the throne, he can go back outside to his warships and the fighting will begin. And even though it can't happen, there's still a part of Jude that wishes they could find a way to be a family again. Unfortunately, when your dad is a bloodthirsty redcap with his eyes on the crown, it just is never going to be that easy. The plan is to have Jude and Cardan on their thrones for the meeting with Matic and his entourage, and Taryn, Vivi, Heather, and Oak, who gives Jude back her wedding ring, will be hidden away in a little alcove out of sight, and the bomb will also be there, ready to jump out of the shadows in case she needs to get involved. While Jude and Cardan get ready for one of the most important political meetings of their life, Jude mentions to Cardan Matic's idea to force Cardan to duel for love. And Cardan says, "It's you I love. I spent much of my life guarding my heart. I guarded it so well that I could behave as though I didn't have one at all. Even now, it is a shabby, worm-eaten, and scabrous thing, but it is yours." It's no big deal, but like, I kind of love you, dude. And then he opens their door, forcing Jude to take all of that in without responding, and they head to the throne room to meet with Matic. All of the royals that have come to town for the show are waiting for them in the throne room, and as they settle in, Daddy Matic marches toward them with Oriana, Grimson, Lady Nor, Lord Gerald, and Queen Surin on her leash. All just here for a little bit of a talk. No big deal. When Matic sees his daughter on the throne as the High Queen of Elfame, it's the first time he's seen her since he killed her, and yet here she is, alive and in charge, and he still refuses to surrender to them. So it's time to hear him out. How is he going to convince Cardan to put his crown on the line? The answer is a battle of pride. Matic proposes a fundamental change to Elfame's monarchy. Cardan is currently the High King because he wears the blood crown, which is attached to the Greenbrier bloodline, and so only Cardan and his kin are capable of ruling, and it's been that way for centuries. But Matic has Grimson on his side, and Grimson forged the blood crown, and he says that he can change the bloodline that the crown is attached to and turn Matic into the rightful ruler of Elfame. So Matic says, let's let the people decide. They can choose, me or you. He unsheaths this giant magical crimson sword and buries it into the ground, and as the floor begins to shake, they all watch this massive crack tear the palace apart, spreading until it reaches the throne that Greenbriars have ruled from for thousands of years and splits it in two. Maddox tells Cardan that even if the people decide to change the crown's bloodline, he will give Cardan this sword, and then Cardan will have a chance to fight for the crown, which means that he has two chances to win, the people's choice and then a sword fight, which also means that Maddox will have the same two chances. As someone that has never been chosen or had the autonomy to choose himself, the idea of an entire kingdom picking Cardan, telling him that they love him and want him as he has always wanted, that is more than a little tempting for this king. Plus, Maddox says that if he doesn't take the fight, then he'll kill Queen Orla with the magical arrow in her chest, so Cardan's in a tough spot. Cardan tells Maddox that he agrees with him on the whole people's choice aspect. He says, "A king is not his throne nor his crown. You are right that neither loyalty nor love should be compelled." Maddox has a point that a leader shouldn't be chosen by a piece of metal tied to a bloodline, but Cardan also says that deciding the king with a duel is ridiculous because even if Cardan lost, Jude would still be the queen. And these two dudes fighting over a piece of metal doesn't solve the problem of a broken system at large. Cardan mentions his prophecy, that he will be the destruction of the crown and the ruination of the throne, and he looks at the ruined throne behind him. Half of the prophecy has already come true. He takes the blood crown into his hands, he looks out at his people, and he says, "Vows should never be to a crown. They should be to a ruler, and they should be of your own free will. I am your king, and beside me stands my queen, but it is your choice whether or not to follow us. Your will shall be your own." And he breaks the crown in two. How would you react to this representation of the lineage of leaders that Elfame has had since its unification, and the most sought-after item in Elfame being destroyed in front of you like it's Katie Heron's prom crown? The people are shocked. Maddox is pissed, and Jude says she isn't sure if she gasps or screams. She looks to the crown's creator, Grimson, who looks at the crown in panic and disbelief. Cardan continues, asking the question that we heard Val Morin ask eons ago at the coronation held by High King Eldred. "Folk of Elfame, will you accept me as your High King?" And they do. They bow to him, choosing him as their rightful ruler regardless of his bloodline. But as they do, Cardan begins to change. His eyes, his mouth, his body, evolving until Cardan no longer stands in front of his people, and in his place is a big-ass snake. Grimson, the idiot that cursed this crown when he made it because all his inventions have to be guarded by his pride, is having a full-on toddler meltdown. He's screaming that the serpent will destroy everything in its path. He says no true love's kiss will stop it, no riddle will fix it, only death. Of course, Maddox's reaction to the situation is, "Oh, no way, I just have to kill a big snake to become the king now." But Jude stops everyone, calling out to the folk that even though Cardan is gone, she is still the High Queen. It kind of works, but with a giant snake monster slithering through the throne room, there is really no way to make the situation feel normal. In the chaos, the snake hunts down one target: its creator. Grimson the blacksmith is oh so serendipitously murdered by his own creation as it sinks its fangs into his back and sucks the life force out of him. F off, Grimson. Everyone is ready for the beast to attack. Weapons drawn, swords ready. Hands sweaty, mom spaghetti. Maddox tells Jude that if she wants to claim the title of High Queen, then she better kill this beast, but Jude is currently swallowed up by the fear and shock of Cardan literally turning into a snake. Sorry for yelling. So her guard pulls her out of the throne room, and the last thing that Jude sees is Snake Cardan wrapping himself around the remnants of his destroyed throne. In the words of Grima Mog, how do you like those apples? Something that sucks about a big scary thing happening somewhere with a lot of people is that not only does the thing happening suck, but even afterward there's this panic and energy and feeling of what do we do now still coursing through everyone, and it's Jude's job now to figure out what to do. Grima Mog pulls Jude out of the throng of panicking folk and gives her a Red Cap style pep talk, which is basically stand up and do it, girl. And Jude says, "Miss Grima, you're hired," and gives her the position Daddy Maddox used to hold, Grand General of the High Court's army. Jude tells her to keep Cardan locked up in the palace and to keep track of his movements, and to send Taryn, the Bomb, and the leader of her royal guard to her. Jude is in a precarious position, and her loved ones and the fate of Elfame depend on her next moves. This is the kind of pressure that she thrives in. Top concerns at this very moment. Maddox's army is still outside. There are going to be a lot of people that don't support Jude as queen. Cardan is a snake. Jude tells the bomb to kill anyone that even whispers about assassinating her, and she tells Taryn that she's gonna need a new wardrobe and a new throne room, minus the snake. It's time to get serious. Baffin comes in to go over Cardan's prophecy with Jude so that she can try and find some sort of loophole solution, because the prophecy already happened, right? Like, it's over? Not quite. Baffin explains that it's a two-parter. The first part is he will be the destruction of the crown and the ruination of the throne, and then only out of his spilled blood can a great ruler rise. Not awesome to hear that your husband, who just told you he loves you for the first time, has to die for there to be a great ruler, but you win some, you lose some. She tells Baffin to check the stars again, and then hears that Cardan has burrowed into the giant crack in the ground from Maddox's sword, and it's now snowing inside. Jude gets settled into her makeshift throne room via Taryn, and it's basically just some moody lighting in a big chair, but it's pretty good for short notice. She lets the Living Council in for a bit of a catch-up, which is just more Living Council noise. They don't want Jude to be queen, they don't want her to make decisions, but no one knows how to turn a snake back into a king. At the perfect moment, Grimamog shows up with some news on Daddy Maddox. He's hoping that this new serpentine twist will have the High Court in shambles, so now he's planning to attack at dawn and take the throne easy peasy. Grimamog also says that there's a rumor going around that whoever kills the snake gets the throne, and now we know that wherever the Snake King goes, he leaves a poisonous trail behind him, so the only way to stop the land from being completely ruined is to ixnay the beast. Becoming the sole monarch of Elfame and losing her husband in the span of seconds has Jude turning into a version of herself that makes her a little bit uncomfortable, and to be honest, I don't love it either. She doesn't know how to do a good job, and she doesn't know how to be different than Maddox. I do think we should give her a little grace, considering no one on the throne has ever dealt with the king turning into a giant serpent before, but what do I know? Later, alone, Jude goes into the throne room and finds Snake Cardan to be much bigger than the last time she saw him, and he's wrapped himself up nice and snug around the broken throne. Even though she told Cardan that she would kill him if she had to, Jude doesn't want to. She tries the last thing that she can think of in the wake of his transformation. She stands in front of the serpent with her feet firmly on the ground, and she asks it to heal Cardan the way that it healed her when she was dying at the end of Maddox's sword. But the land does not answer, and Cardan is not healed. Jude stays in the throne room, sitting in front of Cardan and thinking about how she never got to tell him that she loves him, when the bomb comes in to tell Jude that Maddox wants to come by again with the Court of Teeth to have another friendly meeting and also to see his family. Sure, Maddox, we all still think you're the #1 family man. Jude agrees to host him, but barely. Like, this time, no weapons, and he's not staying for long, because she's got a giant snake and a bunch of other people that want to kill her for the throne to deal with right now. So she has her makeshift throne moved to the courtyard so that she can rightfully force Maddox and his crew to sit on the ground looking up at her. And this is a whole event. Everyone's coming to the family reunion. Grimamog, the bomb, the ghost, the siblings, everyone's coming to say hi to Dad. So weird. Unfortunately, the roach is still in a coma, so he will not be joining us today. I miss him. Vivi says that Heather is in the library looking for some sort of riddle or fairy tale that can help them out, like in a storybook, which is very kind of her. And it's honestly not the worst idea, but it's really an excuse to stay in Fairy just a little bit longer with Vivi so that she doesn't have to have her memories erased. And then Maddox rides in with his creepy little retinue of abusive parents and their daughter queen, who is no longer wearing her bridle. She now has a thin gold chain that penetrates the skin of her wrist that functions as her new leash, and she has a crown sewn into her head, and the scars from the bridle are on display. And again, she's like the same age as Baby Oak. It's so bad. And with that bold entrance, the meeting part 2 begins. This is really the meeting part a billion, because Jude and Maddox have had this conversation over and over, and we've watched Maddox make the same mistake again and again. Never underestimate a scorned daughter. Maddox tells her for the umpteenth time that he has underestimated her and that he will not make that mistake again. And you would think that with Jude holding the literal most powerful position in Fairy that he would mean it, but this is Daddy Maddox and his hubris knows no bounds. He immediately follows this statement by saying, "I have always been as happy to rule through my children as to wear the crown myself." And Jude counters him, saying, "And woe to those children if they will not be ruled ruled by you. Because while Matic misunderstands Jude's actions to be the mistakes of a young and over-ambitious mortal, Jude has always seen Matic for exactly as he is. He could never hide his true nature from Jude because that's the kiln that she was cooked in. But he does have a few good points. He lays out the current predicament that even if Jude wins a war against Matic, she still has the snake and a genuinely endless amount of people that want to get rid of her to take the throne for themselves to deal with. So how do they move forward? That's when the icicles get involved. Lady Nor and Lord Gerald pull out the bridle that they used on their daughter, Queen Surin, and they make Jude an offer. The bridle was made by Grimson and it can work on anything, even a giant serpent king. So they'll give the bridle to Jude so that she can have full control over Carden and maintain her status as the High Queen. And in return, Jude would disband the Living Council and replace them with Matic as her only advisor. And little baby Oak would be married to Queen Surin so that when Oak takes the throne someday, Surin would become the High Queen. It's kind of a genius plan that gives everyone everything that they want, and I think that Jude at the beginning of this series would have been thrilled with this deal. Maybe still hung up on the Oak and Surin marriage aspect of it, but the idea of full control over Elfame and Carden would have been irresistible. Now, after having had control of Carden for a year and fighting her way to the throne with her spies and her sisters and against her father, and then seeing Carden realize that loyalty should be earned, not forced, she doesn't know if this is the right way forward. But with Carden gone, and with Matic and most of Elfame now against her, how else is she supposed to maintain her power? And how else is she supposed to keep Carden by her side? Jude takes the bridle. She'll go through with the deal on 2 conditions. Matic gets rid of the magical arrow that's threatening Queen Orla's life, and Oak does not have to marry Surin. And the deal will go into effect when the bridle is on the snake. So even though Jude is taking the bridle now, she feels like she has the ability to change her mind up until the last second. Lord Gerald whispers to Jude that for the bridle to work, take 3 hairs from your own head and knot them around the bridle. You will be bound together. Matic wants to have a whole grand celebration for this occasion and to make his imminent position of power public knowledge as quickly as possible. So he tells Jude to host a feast where she can announce that she's now going to be working with Matic, and then at a weird bridal ceremony by the beach, she can put the bridle onto the snake and claim once again her title of High Queen. After the meeting, Jude takes a walk by the sea and tosses in a letter to our old frenemy Princess Nicasia that says, if you ever loved him, help me. And then she goes to lie on the floor and spiral catastrophically because she has no idea what she's going to do. To kill the beast or not to kill the beast. And she needs to have a little post-meeting gab sash with her siblings. Taryn is hesitantly hopeful about the deal, like maybe this could be good, but Jude knows that if Matic is her advisor while she's on the throne, it's just gonna be the same constant power battle between them that it always is. Oak is most concerned with the whole forced to marry the abused child queen part of the deal, and he still thinks that girls have cooties, so he's like, guys, I don't want to marry her, but we can't just let her be tortured. We have to help her somehow. But that is easier said than done. Something we haven't really talked about since we first found out about it is that Taryn is pregnant. And if everything works out with Jude as High Queen, then Taryn will be given Locke's estate for herself. But does she really want to raise his kid? It turns out that yes, the mother-to-be is actually kind of excited to have a baby, which I do find a little bit scary because she's so young and Locke was so awful, but at the same time, like hell yeah, Taryn, have a baby and be a badass single mom child. Then we get an update from Heather on her library research about snake stories, but she hasn't really found anything. She tells them one of the stories she read, which is an actual fairy tale called The Serpent by Giambattista Basile, and the sound of her loved ones and this story about a prince cursed to be a snake lulls Jude to sleep. When she wakes up, Jude goes back to the royal chambers where she finds the Bomb waiting for her with a very unique request. The Bomb has been doing everything she possibly can to bring the Roach out of his coma, and none of it has worked. So as a last resort, she asks Jude to use her queenly connection to the land to try and save him. Jude isn't sure that it's going to work because she tried to do the same thing on Carden and nothing happened, but this is the Roach. She's of course willing to try. She goes to the new Court of Shadows lair with the bomb, and she finds that it's much swankier than the last one that the ghost destroyed when he was evil for a second. Carden shelled out the big bucks for this new HQ. Like, there's a kitchen and training grounds, and there's more spies than there used to be. It's a whole fully functioning operation now. They grab the ghost and go to the Roach's bedside to get to work. Jude stands at Roachie's feet and tries to feel her connection to the land, but she has this overwhelming sense of imposter syndrome. She's like, I'm just a rando mortal girl. The magic that's embedded into the very essence of fairyland isn't gonna listen to me. But this might be the only chance she has to save the Roach, so she tries again. With a hand on Roachie's ankle and the knowledge that she is a part of Elfame regardless of her mortality, she thinks, I am your queen and I command you to wake. And so he does. Sweet Roachie opens his eyes in a panic because he doesn't realize he's been down for the count for a while now, and he grabs the bomb to tell her in his last moments before he dies from a poison arrow that he loves her. And the bomb is like, dude, you're literally not dying. Jude just saved you. You're totally fine. And he's like, oh, maybe I should have kept my mouth shut. But we already know the bomb has a big fat crush on him, and so she says just as much. And the ghost and Jude, who are like hiding on the floor, literally crawl out of the room to give them privacy. And now they can be together happily ever after, guys. Unless they get murdered by Carden. The last thing Jude does to get all of the information she can before the bridal ceremony is a visit to her buddy Severin and Mother Marrow, who is the hag that tricked Carden way back at the beginning of the Wicked King. And Jude asks them if they have any ideas on how to end this curse. Mother Marrow, the hag, tells Jude that she already has the answer. Before Grimson was killed, he said that only death could break the curse. Then Mother Marrow gets a little bit nosy, and Jude literally owes her life to her for it, because Mother Marrow says, let me see that bridle for a sec. And Jude explains the tie 3 of her hair's instructions that Lord Gerald gave her, and Mother Marrow says, okay, that's for sure a trick, unless you want to end up bound to the bridle too. If Jude had followed those instructions and tied her own hair to the bridle, she would have been bound with the serpent, and the Court of Teeth would have had full control over her and Carden, which is also why they didn't really care when Jude refused all of the parts of the deal that helped the Court of Teeth, because they didn't really care about the deal when they had this alternate way to control Jude. Mother Marrow says the way that it probably works for real is with a word of command, and they all feel pretty confident that Narcissus the creator used his own name as the password. So now she knows she just has to get it on the snake and then whisper Grimson to actually use the bridle. Back at the palace, Jude gets ready for the feast where she's supposed to announce her new alliance with Madoc and the Court of Teeth, and she thinks about how she's supposed to be as powerful as she possibly can be as the High Queen, but she still feels powerless. Maybe the power was the friends we made along the way. Jude has a big decision to make, and everyone is here to see what she'll do. The Living Council, Severin, Princess Nicasia, Lord Royben, even his girlfriend Kay, who does punch Nicasia as soon as she sees her. Everyone we've met throughout the series is here to see how it will all play out. Jude knows that at a political party like this, she needs to position herself as the one that's actually in charge. So she tells her people that she's planning on carrying out what Carden would have wanted, to be a different kind of ruler and to have a different kind of reign, and that she's been able to strike a deal with Madoc and the Court of Teeth to bring peace to Elfame by controlling the big snake in the throne room. It goes over okay, but it's kind of a we'll believe it when we see it situation, and through it all, Jude really misses Carden. He's the speech maker. She's the murder enemies in the darkness with her spies person. Lord Royben finds Jude on her throne, and she doesn't really know what to expect from him because their relationship throughout this series has been a bit hot and cold. But Royben says that all that stuff Carden was saying about how a leader should be chosen and loyalty should be earned, like, that was kind of based, actually. He's kind of onto something with the whole absolute monarchies are bad vibe, so I get it. You and Carden? I get it. After he said that, I would have fought for the man till I died. And then he goes to deal with the Kay punched the Princess of the Undersea situation. But I love this moment. We know the end is coming. There's only a few chapters left. And even though Lord Royben is a side character in this series, he's been a player since the beginning of the game, like Severin or Mother Marrow. So having them all here in this moment, backing Jude and Carden as their rightful rulers, it makes it feel like no matter what happens in the end, we've been through something great, and this world will hold strong even after the story is over. Aw, Royben. Jude starts toward a freshly punched Nicasia to see what's going on when Maddox stops her to say she needs to behave more queenly, even though he is not her advisor yet. So Jude pulls away from him and takes this sneaky opportunity to steal a few strands of his hair. She's always scheming, even to the bitter end. She pushes past Maddox to get to Nicasia, who agrees to go outside and talk with her in private. Cardan's queen and his ex uniting for his bridal ceremony. It's a weird day, and it's about to get weirder, because outside, before Jude can even get a word in, Nicasia gets down on her knees and begins to beg. She thinks that Jude has everything she's always wanted now that she's the High Queen, so she wouldn't want to save Cardan. But Nicasia pleads Cardan's case, saying that he's kind and thoughtful, and that he's saved human servants, and that he even sent Jude a dress back when they were still enemies at the first coronation in The Cruel Prince. And even if Nicasia hates it, she knows that Cardan loves Jude, so she begs and begs for her to save him. And Jude looks down at this girl that she's hated for so long and who's held her captive and tortured her and wanted her dead. And she sees someone that loves Cardan just as she does. And she says, I don't know how to break the curse. If I could, do you think I would be at this stupid banquet? Tell me what I must slay, what I must steal. Tell me the riddle I must solve or the hag I must trick. Only tell me the way and I will do it, no matter the anger, no matter the hardship, no matter the cost. She holds Nicasia's eyes and she cries. Jude is standing with the only other person worried about Cardan while everyone else is playing politics. And even though these two would never pass the Bechdel test, they're all that Cardan has. And in this moment, in this way, they're all that each other has. They don't have to fight anymore. Jude goes to bed that night thinking about the pros and cons of working with Maddox and permanently trapping her snake husband, and she dreams about Snake Cardan eating her alive. And now the time for Jude to make her final decision has come. She gets ready to face the Snake King, and her sisters come in with a gift that they force Rochi to drag in for them. They found this beautiful handcrafted armor for Jude so that she can look as powerful as she is at the bridal ceremony, and she loves it and she wants to be powerful, but this isn't really a celebratory situation for her. The Roach hands her a few strands of hair that are not his, and Jude tucks them in her pocket next to Maddox's hair. Do I gotta say it again? Always scheming. We know that the folk love a party. We know they love drama. We know they love extravagance. And the bridal ceremony for a Snake King is no exception. There's a good chance that Jude could get eaten, and then the snake would rampage through everything and just murder and poison everyone in its path, but they're gonna look good dying. So they get the army and the knights and the archers and the cavalry, and Grimamog is there with some red caps, ready to smite down anyone who dares stand against High Queen Jude. Reporting for duty, Grand General. Jude is at a crossroad, and she thinks to herself, I have been Maddox's protege and Dane's creature. I don't know how to win any other way but theirs. It is no recipe for being a hero, but it is a recipe for success. I know how to drive a knife through my own hand. I know how to hate and be hated, and I know how to win the day, provided I am willing to sacrifice everything good in me for it. I said that if I couldn't be better than my enemies, then I would become worse. Much, much worse. And she makes her choice. Tied around the bridle are both Maddox and Lord Gerald's hair, and soon they will be under her control along with the Snake King, and she will become the ruler that she's dreamt of becoming since she first tasted power. They march to the shore of Innsmouth, and Jude, decked out in this fancy armor and leading her army, experiences this strange feeling of being what she used to dream about. A knight on a royal steed going into battle, and simultaneously realizing that the reality of facing a battlefield is way different than any imagining of it. Jude's army, Maddox's army, Severin's army, the Court of Termites, the Court of Teeth, even Nicasia and the Undersea are all prepared to fight if things devolve. Jude hops off her horse to bring the bridle to the snake, and she kind of pulls one of those like, hey, it's me. Remember me? Like pick-me girl moments, but what is she supposed to do? The snake is like the size of a boat. She holds the bridle up to the serpent, but she just sees Cardan, the same Cardan that she's had control over before, and she saw up close and personal how much he despised it, and the same Cardan that told her to kill him if he became a monster. And Jude knows that there is only one way to break this curse. So when she steps forward, she puts the bridle onto her belt, she tells Cardan that she loves him, she pulls the sword off of her back, and knowing that this might mean the end of her rule and the death of her love, she swings her blade and cuts off the head of the Snake King. Matic and the Court of Teeth are livid, but Jude doesn't care. She falls to her knees in the blood of this thing that used to be Carden, and she screams with the knowledge that he is gone. People begin to run, and war breaks out behind her. The Undersea declares that they will fight for Jude, and Lord Gerald dies in the fighting. Then Matic is in front of her, telling her to get up. She's the only thing keeping him from the throne now. Jude stands, but she knows that she can't win a fight against him, so she takes the bridle with his hair tied around it off of her belt, telling him that she will use it to stop him. But Matic isn't here to fight. He says, "Enough blustering. You've already won. Look." He grabs her shoulder and turns her to look at the body of the beast she's just slain. And it's glowing. The fighting all around them slows to a stop, and out of the dead serpent's body walks High King Carden. Only out of his spilled blood can a great ruler rise. The prophecy has been fulfilled. It's been a snake the whole time. Carden steps forward as everyone around them, fighting each other only seconds ago, kneel before him, and he says, "The curse is broken, the king is returned." And then our sweet girl Jude barrels into his arms. And Matic is donezo. It's over. He's lost. He said it himself. In this father-daughter rivalry, Jude has come out on top. Everything after Carden walks out of the dead body of a reptile is a bit of a blur. First there was a snake, and then there was Carden, and now they're going back to the palace, and Matic is in chains, and Jude doesn't know if any of this is real. Chad, is this real? Back inside the throne room, Carden uses his magical kingly abilities to fix the giant hole in the ground that Matic made and turn the broken throne into two individual thrones right next to each other. Then he turns to Jude, only in a robe and still covered in snake blood, and says, "I made it for us. Do you like it?" Jude can't take this. She doesn't know what's happening, and she's like, "Yeah, obviously I like the throne that you just handcrafted for me with your magic fingers, but also you just came out of a snake like 10 minutes ago." They go to the royal chamber so that Carden can wash up, and it's just this flurry of people everywhere rushing around to serve the High King and prepare for his return, and it's just too much for Jude. So she slips out to go to her old rooms, and she finds Heather there, who's like, "Oh my god, congrats on the win." And Jude is like, "Yeah, thanks. I think I'm having a panic attack." So Heather helps Jude get out of her armor and distracts her by telling Jude about her and Vivi. Heather has given Vivi a quest. Neither of them want to go back to the mortal world and erase Heather's memories, but Vivi is bound by her promise, so they agree to an updated plan. They'll go back home and erase Heather's memories, but then Vivi has to find Heather and make her fall in love with her all over again, but doing it the right way. And then Heather's memories can be restored. Guys, they have a plan, and it's like actually kind of sweet. Heather and Vivi will also be okay. Carden is not in his royal chambers when she goes to look for him. He's already down at his celebration feast for his return. So Jude takes a minute to get ready and then goes down to celebrate this massive win for Elfame. And even though there's so much they still need to worry about, so many decisions to make and people to answer to, they take tonight to enjoy the wine and the food and the songs about their triumph and the snake meat from Carden's dead body, which is disgusting, but it's fairy. We're going all out tonight. Carden pulls Jude aside for a dance, and it makes Jude think back to when they danced at the coronation that Eldred held, when Jude had just become a baby spy for Dane, and Carden was a depressed drunk, and she can't believe that they've gone from those confused, naive kids to the rulers of Elfame. They go into the secret room behind the thrones, and this is the first second that they've really had alone together since the battle this morning. So Jude sits Carden down, and she opens up to him about all of the things she never thought she'd get to say because she thought he was gone. She tells him that she loves him and that it all started when they worked together after Dane's failed coronation. "I first started liking you when we went to talk to the rulers of the low courts. You were funny, which was weird. And when we went to Hollow Hall, you were clever." And she says she couldn't hate him even when she wanted to, and then he saved her from the Undersea when he didn't have to, and she had just been so scared to feel anything at all because then she'd open herself up to the pain of heartbreak. And for the first time in this series, we get to see Jude be completely free to tell the real truth no matter what the cost is, because she wants to give this to Carden because she loves him. She also asks him what it was like to be a snake, and he says that it was a very strange experience because he didn't know anything except for his raw feelings and Jude. He says, "I knew little else, but I always knew you." And that's it. It's time for the epilogue. The epilogue takes us to Jude and Cardan's official coronation. The courts from all over Fairyland came to celebrate, and Jude and Cardan stand in front of the people of Elfame as Baffin hosts the ceremony. The blood crown is gone, but they keep the tradition of having a blood relative crown the new monarchs, so little baby Oak gets to put the new crowns onto their heads as the people yell out their acceptance of their chosen High King and High Queen. And then, seeing as there was quite a bit of conflict leading up to this moment, they have a few boons to distribute and betrayals to reward, as Cardan puts it. The first gift they give is to Grimma Mogg. They give her the last sword that Grimson ever made as a reward for her loyalty as their Grand General. Then they give Taran the ownership of Locke's estate and land, and they end their investigation into his murder. Pays to have a sister as the High Queen. The last gift that they give is to the Court of Shadows. The Roach, the Bomb, and the Ghost step forward wearing cloaks that hide their identity from the public. Cardan gives them each an enchanted mask, and when they wear these masks, no one will be able to tell what they look like or what they sound like, so they can walk through the kingdom freely and remain loyal spies. And Cardan states that when they wear these masks, no one in Elfame is allowed to turn them away from their hearth. The spies put on their new masks, and Jude says that even she can't tell them apart anymore, but she notices that two of the spies walk away holding hands, and the third sneaks a peek at Miss Taran. Taran and the Ghost? I really need to read the next series. And then it's time for Jude to dole out the punishments. Two soldiers step before the king and queen. One of them represents the soldiers that abandoned Cardan to fight for Madoc and believed that they were wrong, and they want to prove their loyalty to the High Court. The other one represents the soldiers that abandoned Cardan for Madoc and do not want forgiveness. They said, yeah, I abandoned you, and I'd do it again. For the soldiers that ask for forgiveness, Jude gives it to them, saying that they can come back to the royal army, but their hands will be forever red, as though stained with the blood you hoped to shed. And for the soldiers that do not want forgiveness, Jude sentences them to a life lived as falcons. They'll be trapped in the form of falcons until they're able to live for a year and a day without killing anything. So if they want to turn back into their true form, then they'll have to be fed by the kindness of others. Next on the list is Lady Nor and Queen Surin, who tried to trick Jude into living a life under their control. Oak steps in to ask Jude for leniency for Queen Surin, and Jude accepts, so Surin just has to swear herself to Jude and Cardan. Then Jude turns to Lady Nor and orders her to give her loyalty as well, but not to Jude and Cardan. Lady Nor has to give her oath to the daughter that she tortured and abused for power. And after she does, Jude concludes their punishment by disbanding the Court of Teeth. And if Lady Nor ever tries to make a comeback, she will have to answer to Queen Surin. Then last, but certainly not least, Daddy Maddox steps up for his reckoning. This is a tough one for Jude, because not only has he been her #1 combatant in this war for power, but all the way at the beginning of this journey, in the prologue of the very first book, Madoc murdered her parents, and then he stole her away and shaped her to be just like him. Jude thinks about whether or not that murder is something he needs to be punished for now too, and they both know that if anyone else were doling out this punishment, Madoc would be dead. Jude tells him that she'll show him mercy if he deserves it, so she asks him to forget the ghost's true name so that he can be safe from Madoc's control, and then she asks him to swear his loyalty to Jude and Cardan before he hears what the rest of his punishment is. He's not happy about it, but he does it, so Jude deals him his mercy. She says, I sentence you to live out the rest of your days in the mortal world, and to never put your hand on a weapon again. And with that, the war is over and Jude has won. After the coronation, there's a little family after party. Vivi and Taran insist on having a party back at their apartment in the mortal world to celebrate not only the coronation, but also Jude and Cardan's marriage. And Vivi has begun her quest to win back Heather, so she has to reintroduce everyone to Heather, who has no idea who any of them are anymore. Jude is very nervous about bringing Cardan into the mortal world, but he's a very good sport about it. He uses no magic on innocent bystanders, and he even goes to the pizza shop with Jude and Oak, and he wears the paper crown that Vivi hands out, and they surprise the king and queen with a congratulations newlywed sign and a cake with gummy snakes on it, which is so funny because he was a snake and he kind of died, but now they can laugh about it. And they all sit together in their apartment, overwhelmed by the ease of happiness and love at this table, and Jude thinks there will be struggles to come, I am certain, but right now I am equally sure we will find our way through them. And then they toast to family and fairyland and pizza and stories and new beginnings and scheming great schemes. I can toast to that. The end. Thank you so much for watching. I'm so grateful to all of you, and I miss this already. And here's a page-free look at the completed wall. But now it's time to read the Oak duology. Bye! Can't believe you guys made me cry.